Great. Hi, everyone. Those of us who are joining us on Zoom, those of us who are joining us on YouTube Live, and those of us who will join us later when you watch this video on YouTube later, welcome to the 7th episode of Designer's Craft. I'm your host, Dr. Kagonya Awori, and I'm always excited to have you guys here every single month as we talk about tech and the beauty of technology and technology design. Today is a very special edition because we're delving into AI and what we call conversational AI. And I'm very, very happy to have Shymala here with us. She is the head of conversational AI at Ford Motor Company. Yes, Ford Motor Company. I'm sure we've all heard of Ford. So we're going to have a very, as usual, it's always a casual chat. It's always a very engaging chat. And feel free to ask questions. So just etiquette when you join Zoom, put yourself on mute. Also switch off your video, but if you have questions, feel free to type in the chat. If you're joining us on YouTube Live, also type in the chat. And hopefully within the next 45 minutes, we'll be able to get around to your questions. So without much further ado, welcome Shymala, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. So, my name is Shymala Prayaga, and I lead the conversational AI efforts at Ford Motor Company for the autonomous vehicles. So, the ones which will come in future, definitely. And I'm also the founder of the Digital Assistant Academy, where we train and certify people for voice interaction design and conversation design. I am also the founder of Women in Voice Michigan chapter. We are trying to empower and bring more and more people here in the voice tech industry, and women, especially, are people in minorities. That is the goal. So, with that goal, we started this chapter, and we do a lot of activities like what you are doing live and hackathons and talks and things like that as well. And I'm also the author of the book Closed Call, which is my memoir. And I'm writing two more books, Emotionally Engaged Digital Assistant and Humanizing Privacy.
Oh, that is fantastic. I will allow you, sometime later just to give us a snippet of both those books. But I just want to start with a very basic question, especially for those who are very new to this. So, what would you define as conversational AI?
Yeah. So, see, it's like when two people are talking, we call it conversation. So, when you are talking with the bot and the bot is talking with you, we call it conversational AI, where machine is able to converse with the users the way users are conversing with each other. That is a very simple word, like simple sentence or simple definition of conversational AI. So, chatbots or voice applications like Alexa, Google Assistant, and similar kind of voice applications are all part of the conversational AI.
Good. And then what would you say your job entails? Say a typical Monday or Tuesday. What do you get to do about every day?
Uh, it's so, I mean, every day is different. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of research involved. So let's say, for example, I am creating a voice application in first place. So during the initial stages, it's all about strategy, thinking about what do we want to do. For example, if we want to create a customer care bot, so why are we creating? What kind of questions will we be asking? And will it be useful for the users and things like that? So pretty much like what a UX designer would do, we try to
Mhm.
first gauge the viability of the project or product. So we talk with a lot of users. So some days I'm immersed in doing a lot of research with the users and collecting whatever feedback I can to see the viability. Sometimes the other days you would see me designing sample dialogues or conversation designs and then doing a lot of usability testing, like initial usability testing, wizard of Oz testing kind of things, where I am testing the conversations and dialogues with the users, the voice interactions, the overall template, the overall interactions, everything with the users. Other days, you would see me just trying to improve on those things, collecting the data, like why the conversation was not helpful for the user,
Mhm.
or why a certain skill is not being used, and things like that. So based on that, some days I would be immersed in understanding the data and analytics of those kind of things. So it kind of varies day by day and depending on what I'm trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. And is it that the applications, the projects you're building, are they all tied to automotive vehicles? So is
Yeah.
it that the conversational bots will be used in the setting of driving?
It's not in the setting of driving. I am focused on autonomous. I worked on
Mhm.
the one where the setup was driving for the Sync 4 vehicle. So if you have not yet seen Mark E and F-150 is where we have Sync 4, and you would find the voice application I worked on. But now my focus is mainly in the autonomous vehicle side of things. So in this setup, you're not driving, you have ample time. It's like your living room, but living room on wheels, right? So in such a situation, it's like you can do all sorts of things with your assistant, whatever you can do at home, playing music, asking for some information, or finding a point of interest, or climate controls, or reclining the seats, or any kind of things the user would want to do in the car.
Mhm.
So each of the use case is defined as a feature or application by itself, like climate controls, right? How would
Mhm.
someone ask in the car how to change the climate control? Or how would they say, if they say, I'm feeling hot, does that mean they are saying you want me to change the controls, or you're just telling me that I'm feeling hot? So the same way, if they say like, change the climate in the vehicle, I don't know, it's so difficult for people to even phrase something like that, right? And say like, do this in the car, because there are so many different controls which can happen. So really being able to design a conversation which is helpful for them, in a way which is user friendly but also not taxing on the user, because if you are teaching the user how to speak, your system is not natural, we end up getting into
Mhm.
usability issues, right? So
Indeed.
that's the whole focus of my work.
Mhm. And so you're trying to have a natural user interface,
Yeah.
right? That mimics how conversations are had. And I like that part. But the question I have is then how do you test this? Because you mentioned autonomous vehicles, and this is everyday conversation, right? So you want to mimic, say, whether it's a one-seater car or there are four people in the car, you want to mimic those conversations as the car is moving. Do you do these tests with live participants, in an autonomous vehicle, or do you prototype it, or do you recreate the environment? How do you get this real life test even before the product is launched?
So there are multiple stages and multiple phases to this. So just if we are looking at the conversation itself, it can be done without the context. You don't have to be in the vehicle context to design or understand the conversational aspect, like, hey, I want to decline the climate control, or I want to change the climate control, or change the temperature to 20 degrees centigrade, or something like that, right? Those kind of things, you can simply design a dialogue. If that is the initial interaction you want to test, like if the user said this, how will the bot respond, and things like that. It's very simple. We do Wizard of Oz testing, where it is all like UX designers, we do paper prototyping. You don't have to actually have a prototype handy, completely done and ready to test it out, but you can do initial using your paper prototypes or sketches. The same thing, very rough prototypes, very rough mockups, we test them out. And once we are comfortable with it, after that, we try to prototype them and implement. There are a lot of conversational AI platforms and tools which we can use nowadays to quickly prototype and do usability testings even before deploying in the vehicle. Then what we do is at a later stage, because, well, it's not just you said change the climate to 20 degrees and
Yes.
the dialogue is done, right? But it's also like, is it actually doing what it is supposed to do? And that is
Mhm.
where eventually, we deploy it in the vehicle, test it out in the vehicle, and see if it is working and functioning as it is supposed to. We have our own test vehicle, so basically there are variations and different kind of testings we do. One is
Okay.
usability testing, where in the vehicle we will have one-on-one users and then test out the entire interactions and application, similar to, just the
Mhm.
modality has changed, similar to if you have a UX project and you have a mock-up and you want to do a usability testing, you would put them in front of a computer and you say like, do all of these things, right? In our
Exactly.
situation, it's
Mhm.
the car. So in our situation, we put them in the car and test out these interactions.
And
So
sorry,
some
continue,
usability
continue.
testings, yeah, some usability testings are manned, like where we are there observing and doing all of the things. The other kind of usability testings, what we do is we have the assistant deployed in the vehicle and users interact, we do beta testing kind of things where we have users, and now they are testing out the different kind of things in the vehicle. We are collecting the analytics and seeing what's happening, where it is breaking, what is working, what kind of utterances the users are using, is the response helpful or not, how long the session lasted, and all of those things. And based on
Mhm.
that, we try to improve the experience back and forth.
And I like that you mentioned Wizard of Oz testing. I don't know if everyone is familiar with it, but I'll allow you to talk about what do you mean by Wizard of Oz, and what's the origin of that test? Yeah, because
Yeah,
it's
it's
one of my favorite
interesting.
testing. Yeah.
So it's interesting, like, if you have seen The Wizard, or, think about a puppet show or something like that. There are two puppets in the forefront, but there's someone on the back end, trying to play it, and then there's sound and the effects and everything. So that person is the wizard, which is making all of these things happen. So in the voice world, it's like when you are interacting with something, you don't have an
Hmm.
assistant ready. So what we
Hmm.
do is simulate the same kind of thing where someone from the team becomes the wizard acting as a bot, and then you already have a user, and someone would actually show the screens if relevant. In our case, like for vehicle, we do have screens, right? So
Hmm.
the person can either speak out loud whatever the bot will say, or we pre-record those things and we play out. So for example, let's say we are testing out the navigation, and we want the user to say find the nearby Starbucks, or I'm hungry, or something like that. So how would the bot respond? So we have this person who would speak out the response, what actually the bot would say, and then see how the user reacts, and then how the user would interact with the system, or what kind of questions or follow-ups the user might have. So that's how it's all simulated. The person is acting as a bot in that case.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. Like I mentioned, sometimes what we do is just record those things, because it becomes there are multiple things with voice, right? I can speak in my tone and voice, which may not be 100% accurate when it comes to how the bot would respond. So, if you want a real kind of, like feel of that voice and tone, you need to record things and test it out, so that you also are seeing the pitch of the voice, the tone of the voice, the speed, the accent, everything, and seeing if it is useful for the user or annoying for the user or too robotic and things like that.
Hmm.
If your goal is just to test out the words at the moment and nothing else, then you
Okay.
can act as a wizard. So there are different goals based off which you will decide how you want to go about it.
Okay. I mean, I really like that because, as you said, Wizard of Oz gives the participant or the end user feels that it is a real conversation with a bot, but really behind the curtain is, an engineer or someone else who is now pretending for the bot to be live. And this has very, very huge benefits, even when we're developing complex systems like the ones that you're developing. So that's really, really good. So and I like it because it's a method that we can use, or even machine learning engineers and AI technologists can use this method to really mimic what the real user would experience. But now a bit about Ford. So one of the things I love about Ford is actually the founder. So yeah, so Henry Ford, and one of the greatest quotes, which I know you know about it because we've borrowed it in the world of user experience, is that he said, if I asked the people what they want, they would have said faster horses. So essentially what he meant was that it's not about what people say they want, it's about, what you observe. There's the difference between wanting something and needing something. So for you, Shymala, have you found that you have adopted or used this policy, especially when it comes to building conversational AI bots?
Definitely, I would say, this applies to everything. So I would say we have adopted for sure. I mean, I do that all the time with my conversations and designs, because when users say they want something, they don't know how much they can do. So or how much they can use something. So for example, many years back, website was even, so complex for people to interact, and we were trying to solve and make it usable for people to even use a website. Now it has
Exactly.
become a norm, but how did that even be like was made possible? Like, well, no one told me that I want to interact with a website, so we create the need, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then we teach the users, or we show them like what it is capable of doing, and then they do it. Same Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant, they've done. So conversational AI is speaking that way. So in the car, many years back, car was just a mode of transport from point A to point B. That's what users wanted to do. Like, who would have expected, like, well, you can connect your Bluetooth, now you can listen to music, you can call someone using the Bluetooth in the car, hands free, you don't have to worry about anything at all. And then now you can read emails and do all sorts of things. Now you have a full, big 12-inch, 16-inch screen display in the car, which people want to interact with. So it's exactly the same kind of thing. You have to tell the user, what they want. Sometimes they may not know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's very, very true. And speaking of users, so the furor around autonomous vehicles, I'm sure you witnessed this, when now the tests that were run a couple of years back, and there are these reports of autonomous cars crashing people or failing some tests. So I like that you're smiling because you're like, yep, you're very familiar with it.
Yeah.
So then what are these and other issues, I guess, that your or customer feedback that you kind of see that it's top of mind for you, maybe every day or every week,
See,
these
it's the
concerns.
fear of technology. So many years back, even technology, people were like, oh no, I don't want to use technology at all. I'm happy whatever I have. Even if go beyond that stage, people were fine with letters and, like all of those things. They never wanted a telephone at home. Like, it was a luxury for many people. I still remember we never had television till I was in like 10th grade, because my mom used to say, it's going to spoil us. Your eyes will, it will damage your eyes and all of those kind of things. So we live in that fear with everything. And now everyone is glued to television, Netflix, and all of these things, right? So
I agree.
anything has that initial inhibition, anything would have it. Now with autonomous vehicles, what you see is, well, this accident, someone died, blah blah blah, but what you don't see is the good things what it is capable of doing and is able to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
AI. In At the end of the day, an AI is trying to recognize the data, understand what's happening, simulate the experience, see like what's on the road and where the road leads. It requires a lot of data, it requires a lot of effort to collect all of those things and differentiate whether this is a human or a trash can, like
Yeah.
understanding those patterns and those kind of things. So in order to do that, there's a lot of work being done, and when there's a lot of these kind of things done, there are testings, of course. It's unfortunate that the negative news is always the forefront and people get scared and all of those things. But it's the same thing
Exactly.
with anything. Like, if you look at flights and all, we have our own inhibitions, like, well, what if it crashes and things like that, right? But we still have
Mm-hmm.
to have that leap of faith. So as a user, we will have to do that. But the bigger thing is, how does the brand promote the trust, or how does the brand promote the safety?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is where things like the digital assistant or voice assistant comes into play. Like in the
Mm-hmm.
vehicle, hey, I'm there to help you out if there is anything, or constantly updating you about the situation around you or things like that. Like I keep saying, when vehicle becomes the driver, voice becomes the companion, because you have nothing
Exactly.
else, right? So
Exactly.
that is how I see. It's all about what you say. It's not that people will not try. Tesla uh, has some test vehicles. Waymo has some test vehicles out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people are using Waymo because they are curious. So you will always have a different kind of users. Keep this in mind. Not everyone is an early adopter. You would have couple of people who are early adopters because they are too keen in the technology side of things and they want to see what's happening. There may be some people who will look at like, well, yeah, many people have used it, I've seen some positive reviews, now I can try it. Then there will be
Mm-hmm.
laggards who are going to try it towards the end, when it has existed for many years and now we know like it works and all of
Exactly.
those things. So you will have all of those different kind of users. So designing a solution around early adopters and then transitioning to laggards is where we have to be thinking about.
Okay. That's good. I mean, I must admit, I'm definitely not an early adopter. So I usually wait for technology to sort of do its rounds, then I come on board. I'm like, okay, now I can try it. But I'd like to take a few comments or questions from the audience. Um, I believe Stephanie Ponal, if you would like, you could then just ask the question yourself if you're still around.
Hi, thank you. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much, Shymala, for the great insights and learning more about what you guys are up to and also the conversational AI. So, I had just two questions, and that was what are the key challenges that you've been facing designing this program, and who are your biggest competitors currently? Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
interesting. So challenges, there are many, you know. So when you think about, you know, enabling a voice assistant in the car, the biggest challenge is connectivity. You need to have constant connectivity. If you don't have connectivity, then you have to store all of that locally in the vehicle. So you have to think about the space in the vehicle, like how much space is available. And it's not like, you know, the car system is more complicated than your laptop or your smart speakers in general. The architecture is very complex. So being able to, microphone is somewhere, speaker is somewhere, all of them, those are connected through different sources. So being able to design a solution which is able to do what it is supposed to. When the user initiated the voice assistant, the microphone needs to open, the speaker needs to speak out something, and then we have to display something on the screen. All of these are individual elements which are being tied through different APIs or different web calls, right? So being able to make it work seamlessly with minimal latency is a big challenge in first place. The second thing is context. Testing out things in context is so difficult in an autonomous world because, you know, it's, you have a static vehicle, and if you are testing out, it's different. But if someone is in the vehicle on the road and then you are testing it out, it's completely different, because then you are able to see what kind of fears is triggering what kind of feelings, and then you know what kind of questions are they asking the assistant or things like that. So it's completely different. So
Mhm.
being able to test in that kind of situation is slightly challenging, with how things are set up and how everything works. Because right now we are trying to test everything. It's very new for us, right? Everything is very new. The autonomous vehicle is not even out, and if we have to do something, we have to think about all of those. But the capabilities, all the different capabilities the vehicles are able to provide is excellent. There are a lot of challenges, even with the general speech recognition systems. There's a lot of different engines which work together to ensure that when the user said something, it is interpreted, and then we fulfill the user's request and then speak out to them. A lot of different engines work in conjunction. So being able to make sure everything is working with the minimum risk or failure is a big challenge. Now, when it comes to competitors, well, everyone is our competitor and everyone is our partner. That's how I would put it. Because yeah, Amazon is trying to get into the voice space in the car, and Google and all of these things. But at the same time, there are other auto companies as well, right? But they are also in some ways are enablers as well. So I
Mhm.
would say like it's both ways.
Okay.
Great.
Wow.
Thank you. It's very
Yeah. Thank you for
exciting,
that great
actually.
question.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for that very great question. In fact, my question again is that, Shamila, so what would you say? I mean, I'm just thinking about the autonomous vehicles. Um, what problem are they solving? If we just go back to the basics.
There are so many people who cannot drive or who do not want to drive in first place for whatever
Mhm.
reasons. I know a person who's physically disabled and is not able to drive. Okay, there are
Mhm.
people who are blind, they may not be able to drive because legally they are not allowed to, right? And there are people who are physically handicapped from bottom up. So first and
Mhm.
foremost thing it does for people who are or older people, like I have my neighbor who has Alzheimer's. So last year she actually met with an accident because she forgot while driving, and Alzheimer is a very big problem, and she forgot
Mhm.
that, well, she has to apply brake, and she met with a very big accident. Luckily her car was total, nothing happened to her, but her family was like, you are not driving anymore. There are people
Mhm.
like that, older people, or like a lot of people who may not be able to drive, and autonomous vehicle kind of helps those kind of people, because it is enabling you to go from a point A to point B without you having to drive. You can comfortably sit. When I was in India, I used to have a chauffeur who used to drive me. Honestly, I never knew how to drive in India,
Mhm.
because the culture where you have a chauffeur, you are very comfortable, you don't have to. But then not everyone has that kind of luxury to pay a lot of money to a chauffeur, or they may not have the luxury to own a car,
True.
right?
True.
And they are dependent on using some sort of vehicle. Now another thing is, especially with Ubers and all of these vehicles out there, there are again bad news. Like, we hear about all the different kind of things like rapes and killing and all of those things. Although,
Mhm.
no one talks about the good things, like this driver was excellent and he took me from point. I
Yeah.
had a Uber driver who actually was excellent, and she went out of her way to help me when I was in a business trip. But then
Mhm.
people talk about the negative things, right? So now
True.
there are women's safety and other safety related issues in everywhere. So autonomous vehicle is unmanned, you don't have someone in the car, you feel more comfortable going from point A to point B. You don't have any kind of risk of getting hurt or any kind of abuse or anything, because there's no one who would do that with you. So from the safety standpoint also, many people would actually prefer using something like that. So there are a lot of use cases for sure when it comes to people. COVID has changed a lot of things from for us, right? COVID happened, and it was a disaster in United States. I don't know how it was there, but we were in complete lockdown, and we were running out of things. We had to order groceries and things, and there were very few people out there actually going and shopping and delivering things on your behalf, and things were delayed. So if I ordered something, it would come like later, or it will come like after 2 days or 4 days and things like that. It was a total disaster. It wasn't like if I ordered milk today, I will get it. So because you are dependent on a person to do that for you. But imagine if an autonomous vehicle was able to, without someone in the car, just, deliver things for you on your behalf or wherever you want, or pick up things for you and all of those things. So much can be done, because now you're not dependent on such things. And with a pandemic like what we just recently faced, of course, it enables more and more people to deliver things quickly without having to worry. So there are a lot of different use cases from the current standpoint and also from the future standpoint, which we can look at why autonomous could be and would be a good use case.
And even just, I mean, thank you for that. And it's true. It's that we can apply. It can be a solution for, as you said, those who can't drive, or contexts where driving is not an immediate option. And I was just thinking around. You mentioned the natural user interfaces, which is, I'm very passionate about that. And when it comes to now doing designing bots or designing the conversations around that, I think one of the struggles I observed, I was previously involved in a project, is that trying to make it sound as natural as possible is not an easy task. And also sometimes it depends on is it the corpus, or the bag of words or sentences that this bot will pick from, right?
Mhm.
So then how do you allow this? How do you ensure that this artificial intelligent bot can continue learning? What techniques do you use? So, I mean, feel free to go technical here, because I know some people in this audience are quite technical. But how do you then ensure that this the if we call the AI you know, Angela, that Angela will understand and differentiate between the mother when she enters the car, the dad, the child, and then be up to date with that, and whatever slang will be used. And then in our context of Africa, even in Kenya, we're multilingual. So that code switching that takes place, again, that's a big challenge, I know, when it comes to doing this work. So then how do you guys, or what strategies do you use? Feel free to talk about what you can talk about. Yeah.
So there's a lot of things here, right? So first thing is natural language, which you spoke about. So everyone speaks differently. So even if I look at India, we have so many languages in first place. And even if you look at, our main language, I would not call it national, but the prominent language, Hindi, there are like 10 or 20 different variations of that language alone with the different local slangs and all of those. So I understand what you're saying. So the biggest thing is, this requires a lot of effort. So first of all, let's say if your assistant Angela is able to understand multilingual, it needs to have data from all of the different languages and how people speak. So the first part is the recognition part itself, not even the natural language, but recognizing what you are saying and understanding this is Hindi, English, Spanish, or whatever language, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of data which is required, a lot, tons and tons of data. It's a lot of effort to collect that kind of data from people to recognize a language in first place, and then train the AI models so that they recognize between the different things. Right now the way companies do is they collect a lot of data, they train the system, but they do not have a simple way to recognize it. So they allow the user to choose the preferred language and say, what is your preferred
Yeah.
language? But that's not ideal, right? What is ideal is I switch between multiple languages. I'm a multilingual myself. And sometimes what happens is Hindi naturally comes to me. So when I'm
Mm-hmm.
speaking, all of a sudden I would start using some Hindi words accidentally,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because English is not my native language. So this will happen so often with many people. So the assistant would just throw an error saying, I'm sorry, I do not understand what you said, right? Because it is not able to make sense. But the natural language understanding and the natural language system is not yet there to understand and, train the data that way. Basically, the AI system needs to understand the different accents and being able to do that. What we do is we collect all the different ways the user can say something. So we do natural language studies. So basically, we'll give some sort of context to the user and ask like how would they ask a voice assistant to for the same kind of information. And there are tons of ways the user can ask for the same thing. What is the weather? Do I need an umbrella? Will it rain? And do I need a snow boot or things like that? They all mean the same thing for the user. They are wanting to know the weather information, but the way they ask may depend on the region, the slang, and the location, and how you speak or how you translate, and then all of those things, right? So that's one part to it. So with the natural language study, we try to collect as much variations of how the user can ask for something, and then we train the system. Like we add it into the language model and train the system. Like this is the intent. Intent is whether, and these are the 10 or 100 or 1,000 ways the user will ask for the same thing. Now, you may not always be 100% accurate. There may be some people you might have missed, and that is where analytics help. So, first and foremost, that's how I do. We do natural language study and we save it. But then on the other side, what we do is analytics is a very good way of collecting everything. Like we are using analytics for a long time for everything, right? Like websites and eye tracking to see where people are seeing something and how long they look at something and their attention span and things like that. We have similar kind of analytics with voice, where we would know what utterance was used to request to make a request, whether the request was fulfilled or whether it failed. So collecting those data and utterances from the user and knowing what they said and whether it was successful or failed tells us like, well, there's a new utterance here which was not recognized because we do not support it, and then training the system with those new utterances which we have identified. Again, that's what we keep doing. But what would be ideal is right now, the way these systems work is you have to say specifically, will it rain or do I need an umbrella? And if that is the word which has been, feeded into the system and trained, that's what it will understand. But
Mm-hmm.
if you slightly change the, word, it may not understand. And AI system still needs to recognize, and I think they will evolve eventually to the point where, it is just able to pick the word and understand the meaning without you having to say the entire thing. And Google is doing a good job there already. So I would
Mm-hmm.
say like there's a lot of work still to be done, but at least we know how to solve for some of the natural things
Mm-hmm.
now. So yeah, that's how we've been doing things.
And other areas of machine learning, especially when it comes to natural language and natural ways of communicating, have faced certain biases. So I'm sure you know the biases that were faced in facial recognition, where Black women were not recognized, and there are other biases that are faced in other so biometric ways. So when it comes to voice, would you say that there are less biases, or how do you actively mitigate these biases? Can
There's a
there
lot.
be a bias in terms of voice?
There are a lot of biases. I mean, more than
Mm-hmm.
others. And I have a blog just focusing on the biases and how to
Oh.
solve for it. Yeah. So see, like you mentioned, with the facial recognition, the biggest bias is accent. First of all, the voice assistants do not understand all of the accents or languages. Is the first bias, right? The
Mm-hmm.
second bias is female voices are less recognized than male voices, even in voice
Interesting.
assistants. And I think 28 or 30% of Black voices are still not recognized. So,
Oh.
which is again, like how demographic biases are there when it comes to voice assistants. And of course, slangs and other things are there. The other part of these biases is most of the female voice assistants are female, Alexa, Siri, and all of these. And the default voice was a female.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, after the controversies and all the things, people were talking about these things, there were active petitions and stuffs like that. These companies realized, like, well, I need to have a male and a female, and they started giving options to the user to choose whatever voice they want. But still, in many cases, it's a default voice, and the name itself is a female name. So there are
Mm-hmm.
biases, even if you give me a voice to choose from, but your name is like Alexa or Siri, which is like a female voice
Mm-hmm.
name. There are biases. But then on the other side, what we have also started seeing is the responses and how these assistant respond again has some biases there. And there's a lot to uncover here in first place. The second thing, on the user side, what we have seen is, because most of the assistants are female, they tend to be exploited or abused more. So people would say, like, if Alexa said something and it's not great, you would say shut up or you are stupid and things like that, right? But if the same answer was given by a male, probably you would not see that kind of abuse more. So there are lots and lots here when it comes to conversational AI, and we don't have a solution for all of these, but at least we can solve for the low hanging ones, which is the accents, the demographics, the regions and slangs, and local ways of saying things, and these kind of things at least. And the male and female kind of things for sure. Companies
Mm-hmm.
are trying understanding and recognizing these and now working towards this. The first and foremost thing to solve for this is understanding who you are designing for. So, and have a more diverse team. If you have all male white American people designing your product, it will be a male white American product and will have biases. So you need to have a diverse team if you want a diverse product.
What is interesting is that I didn't know, I mean, what you talked about, how we react to the voice. So, as you said, and I'm really looking forward to reading your blog post. So, and I'm sure the audience is too. Feel free to just type it into the chat, that people respond more angrily to a female voice. And I
Yeah.
was thinking about myself, because, these biases are exhibited by everyone. It's not that, a particular race is more biased than the other. I mean, in some contexts. And I remember, like, when I listen to directions, I prefer a female voice. When I'm listening to true crime, because I do listen to a lot of crime, I like it when it's presented by a male voice. So I ask myself, why is that? I'll probably have to introspect. But indeed, we do have these
We
biases.
have
Yeah.
unknowingly. So some biases are very obvious, some biases are unconscious biases. We don't know. Though,
Exactly.
and that happens, like even at work, we have unconscious biases, right? Like, oh, so we unconsciously make those biases even with our bots, and it
Mhm.
happens. So, and that is where we need to look at it holistically and try to solve for it. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just one way or the other. Even when we were doing our research and trying to understand, whether we want a male or female voice, we
Mm-hmm.
had all sorts of users, and they were like, well, if I'm asking for weather information, or if I'm asking for like calling someone and things like that, I would prefer a female voice. But if it is something to do with owner's manual, or how do I change my tires, or like things like that, I would actually trust a male voice better. So we have those biases, like
Yeah,
female cannot drive, or female have a bad driving direction or sense and things like that. So we make those biases, and unconsciously we stick with them.
that's so true. I saw another lovely question from Esther, I believe. Feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the session. So I was asking whether it's possible to implement an encoder and a decoder kind of model to sort of translate the different languages that users might probably have when you're talking to the bot. So is it possible to do that? And also, how easy is it to implement a text summarization strategy if I was talking about like the weather? So is it possible to sort of summarize different themes to different categories so that the bot can easily decode your message? And then the other question I'd have is, in terms of language models, I know framing the context can be quite difficult. So how do you ensure that the language that the bot understands is sort of within the same context? Because different words, or rather same words, can have different meaning. So how do you like design and build a model within the context framework that would be able to assist the bot to sort of like learn better and give accurate answers or whatever? Yeah, thank you.
So in order to understand all of these, this is a great question. You need to understand the basics, like how it works in first place, right? So you said something. You said, what is the weather? Okay. It is in a spoken word, which has to be converted into a machine readable format. And that is where the first thing, the automated speech recognition system, would come into play, where ASR system is taking your spoken words, converting into a machine readable format, and then breaking it down. And that's where, all the different words and all of the things, whatever has been said, is used to recognize whether it was in English or Spanish or whatever language. Because based on the words, it now interprets the language and then understands what has been said. So that's one part. Now, when the spoken words are said, there are keywords. So the natural language understanding piece is the one which is constantly looking for the keywords. We call it intents. We call it different intents. So when we are designing, what we do is we create intent. So let's say the intent of the user is to get weather information, right? So what we do is get whether is the intent, and these are the 10 or 20 or 100 different ways the user can ask for the weather information. So
Mhm.
we map those things. So we now know, like, okay, weather intent, the weathers and all. So now when the user said, what is the weather? The keyword itself, the weather, is what the intent, the NLU would understand and match and say, like, well, yeah, we have an intent for this thing. So now we recognize and we are able to fulfill it. So once the NLU understands it, then comes the, sometimes there's a dialogue manager involved, depending on, whether it's a one shot or whether there's a back and forth required. So dialogue manager is responsible for all of those. But once the intent is recognized, that is when we have to fulfill the request. So now we recognize the user wants to get the weather information for which location. We know the location information. If we don't know, we will start, the dialogue manager will ask for what, which location and all of those, right? Once we have that, comes the fulfillment. Now, where do you get that information from? So that is where what happens is, let's say you have here map provider, which is giving you that information. So here would give you the coordinates, and it would give you a very machine readable format of that information, like Seattle, rainy, temperature, 30 degrees, whatever. It will give you
Mhm.
all of those in a very machine readable format. Now that is sent back from the fulfillment logic, like, well, this is the user request and this is what we found. Now you cannot just say it in that format, saying whether, rainy, blah, 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 the coordinates or whatever information you got. So you have to make it more human readable. And that is where the text to speech engine and the conversational designer's job comes into play. Like when they have designed the response, the weather in Seattle is rainy today. There are chances of, like, yeah, the weather in Seattle is 20 degrees centigrade. There are chances of rain or something like that. So those dynamic elements are tied to your entire dialogue. So now the rainy and the temperature, all of those are dynamic slots which are information which is being filled by your dialogue manager, right? And then it's played back. So there's a lot of things which is happening here. It's not just one system. And then the text to speech engine will now convert whatever the textual version we have created for the machine to read. So there is tuning which is involved so that you can create a more human like kind of version so that it doesn't sound too robotic. So there's a lot of things which is happening here. Now, when to your question, like how to actually create an encoder decoder kind of solution for recognition, I'm not very much sure how that would work. Right now, the way the natural language system works is it tries to understand the different languages based on the words, and then if it recognizes, if it has high confidence that this is Spanish, that is how it will proceed, and the entire system would then be Spanish. So that's how it works. On the text to speech side, there's a lot of different things based on the language. Everything could be changed provided you have a multilingual solution. If you recognized the language but you don't support it, then you have to come up with a different strategy, like how do you respond back. So there's all of these different kind of things you have to be thinking about in your strategies. And even the translations, right? It's not just a Google Translator, like you put in a word and it automatically translates and does things for you. It is an engine which has to genuinely support that language. And most of the engines do support a lot of languages, like especially the ones in the car support 100 plus languages, so that it can work anywhere. So you need to look at the companies who are actually creating multilingual kind of solutions so that it helps.
Mhm. I mean, those are very, very good questions. And I just wanted to understand, I mean, as a build on that. So then does Ford then build its own corpus from scratch, or do you or from existing? So when you talk about your text to speech, is everything built in, or do you partner with others who have already sort of, so you don't reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, see, with the automotive company, our core business is transportation, right?
Uh-huh.
So definitely, we are not focusing on, or we are not a tech company focusing on just the speech recognition modules and things like that. There are a lot of great companies out there who have already done a lot of great work, and even some companies have gone beyond, being able to recognize and separate the background noise with the user voice and all of those things. So there is a lot of evolution and a lot of work already being done. So it doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel for
Mhm.
something which has already been done by someone. So that's where partnership helps.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah,
Mhm. And that's true, right? There's no point reinventing the wheel. If there's an expert, partner with them, and that's really collaboration is quite important,
everything you
especially with
cannot
tech.
you
Yeah.
cannot or you should not be thinking about building everything from the scratch just because you have a vision. So that's why these partners exist. And there's you have to have a clear strategy about your build versus buy versus purchasing and all.
Okay. And I like designer's craft because without even realizing it, time flies really fast. So I'm just gonna ask one final question to you, and if there's no other question from the audience, that is. And it's, so what do you think is the future of this, and how do you see an intersection with more players on the African continent? Yeah. So what's the future of conversational bots in general, and do you have a lens or a perspective for the African continent?
See, so I would say the future definitely is spoken. I have a podcast which is called The Future is Spoken because it is for
Nice
sure,
name.
right? Thank you. So, if you look at the predictions, I think in the next 5 years, the prediction is that voice tech will be a multi-billion market. And there are a lot of reasons behind that. The first and foremost thing is you are looking at voice assistant in a home kind of setup right now, right?
Mhm,
And people are using it to play music and all of those things, but just leave the home setup for now and think about other setups, corporate setups. Right now, for a big company, like Microsoft or Amazon or Google, they have a lot of customer care related things. If you are in a consumer driven product space, you would have a lot of different kind of customer care query, and you have a dedicated team working on trying to solve all of those things. Sometimes what happens is there are redundant kind of or repetitive kind of queries which are being come, and there are agents who are solving those queries. If there's a way to automate some of those things, so if there are repetitive or low risk kind of things which you can automate in your business, why not? And that is where conversational AI would help, right? For example, Amazon did this, where every time you buy a product, of course, some people will have my product did not come on time, or I want a refund, or it's too late, or whatever, or where's my package. Some of these are so common, you don't need a person actually helping you out. If there's a conversational AI which can help you
that's
out with
good.
these kind of things, you can simply have the bot take care of all of those things and bring in a human only when there is a serious handoff required. So
Hmm.
companies have started to think about these strategies in corporate world or enterprise world. Healthcare, so much could be done in healthcare world right now, because we have tons of things. For example, every time I go to the doctor for my primary care thing, there are set of questions she would ask me, and I have to keep
Hmm.
saying, and she would manually check. So it's taking time, and the other patients are waiting outside. So there's a lot which is happening. So there's so much possibility to optimize with those kind of things as well, right? You can optimize the healthcare. And even in hospitals, like last year was terrible. I had like 2 or 3 surgeries. I was hospitalized multiple times, and in between the COVID, my husband was not allowed to be with me in the hospital. So I still remember, like, I came out of the surgery, and then once I was conscious and they put me in the room, I was super hungry because they did not allow me to eat anything the whole day.
Yeah,
And
so
then yeah, and after that, and because of COVID, there was shortage of staff, and I kept asking, pressing that button they had, and requesting someone to get me food. And 4 hours later, my food came, and I was like so annoyed and pissed that I cannot tell you. Imagine if there was a voice assistant who can help because there's shortage of staff or nurse or whoever,
mm,
and is able to help with some of those queries or ordering food on your behalf and getting things and stuffs like that, whatever you
mhm,
need. So operation theaters, or inside the healthcare system, there's a lot which could be done as well. Now when it comes to education, there's a lot which can be done, like schools and colleges are adopting conversational AI as well. They've adopted technology, so those kind of things will be helpful as well. So there's a lot of industries, drive-throughs, right? Definitely McDonald has started this thing, but a lot of other companies will also evolve and start doing these kind of things. Think about all of these: food industry, restaurant industries, all of these. There's a lot of opportunities. There's a big future for voice now in the African context. I'm sure you may have similar kind of things where you have to wait for the restaurant. Sometimes there's a lot of people already in, you have to wait, and you have to, after you get your seat, you have to then order, and then all of those kind of things. Imagine there was a voice assistant, you don't have to worry about touching anything, and you can simply order, a kiosk where you can simply order things. and just get things done, or the medical system in Africa, or any such things,
Education.
governments, legal, and all of these different industries will start picking up, because there's so much women's safety, like if there are things like these where conversational AI will start picking up, there's a lot of opportunities for sure.
Mhm. And that's true even in sectors like education, where we have gaps, right? So say we have, one teacher to maybe 20 pupils. And now if some lessons can be, if you have a more personable bot, right? So it's Mrs. Mina, and she's a teacher, and that's really a virtual agent, and has a human voice, has human gestures and human actions. We could actually reduce that gap. So indeed, yeah, there are lots of very good applications for this. And maybe you could just share for those who are interested, maybe where they could start. I like that you have a blog and even the books. So sorry, the last thing, your books, right? So maybe touch a bit on the books, and then yeah.
Yeah, so the emotionally engaged digital assistant, that is that book, and humanizing privacy, they might come this
Mhm.
year. My goal is to have it launched this year. So basically, when you have a voice assistant, initial utility would be super high because you are super excited, and you want to try out all sorts of things. But gradually, after a peak time or the honeymoon period, when it is over, you would start to see the utility reduces, and you may not want to interact, and some people just shove the voice assistant in the closet because of privacy issues and all of those things. So eventually what happens is it becomes a novelty for us. Like initially we want to try it out, later on we're like whatever, and so many people have started to do those kind of things. But well, the future of voice is great. There's a lot of opportunity, and how do we do that? So that is what my book talks about, how we can create that emotional engagement with the users by humanizing privacy, humanizing design, humanizing conversation design, humanizing technology, and all of those things, and reducing the biases, making it more inclusive. So my book talks about all of those things, have a couple of frameworks and you know tested methodologies in there. So yeah.
That's great. And I mean, I wish you all the very best in getting the book out. And thank you very much for your passion in this area. It's new to some, familiar to some, but I think it's very important. If we just look at the whole context of, conversations, yeah. We the other day I was using an intelligent one that, to schedule my emails, and I was conversing with it via email, and I felt like I was talking to someone, and that's where I hope we will go with conversational agents. And I like what you said about the we buy these systems like the, this, I'm not mentioning the brands or whatever, but after some time, because it's very dumb, it just does, switch on the lights, switch off the lights, check my mail, but it becomes boring. So I cannot wait for a time when it will really understand in the context you gave of, you're hungry, I'm hungry, order for me some food, or, call me a taxi, something more, beyond that is really what we're looking forward to. So Shymala, thank you very, very, very much. Thank you very much, the audience, for those who joined us on Zoom, for those who asked questions, Stephanie, Nesta, and many others, and also for those who've joined us on YouTube Live and those who've joined and watch later. Asante sana, and see you again next month for another episode of Designers Craft. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.